Level 1, the beginning. You met at a party, and by the end of the night, you couldn't remember what the party was for because the party had become irrelevant the moment you started talking. The intensity was immediate, and you took the immediacy as evidence of something real. The way they looked at you, fully specifically, like you were the most interesting person in the room in a room full of people, felt like recognition rather than performance. And you had no framework yet for understanding that those two things can be identical in appearance and completely different in nature. The first weeks were everything. Constant contact, long conversations that went until 3 a.m. about things that felt important, the specific electricity of someone who wants to know everything about you right now, who can't get enough, who makes you feel simultaneously seen and wanted in a combination you hadn't experienced before this intensity. They said I love you faster than anyone you'd been with before. You hesitated for a moment, a small hesitation, a flicker of something that you couldn't name and didn't examine, and then said it back because it was true and because the hesitation felt like fear rather than information. Your friends met them twice and said they seemed great. Your best friend said they seemed intense. You said that's just how they are, that's just passion, that's just what it feels like when someone actually cares. You believed this completely. Everything was perfect. The perfection had a quality you couldn't identify yet, a pressure behind it, a speed that didn't leave room for the ordinary spaces that relationships need to breathe. You didn't notice the speed. You were running too fast to notice you were running. Level 2. The first red flag. It happened on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, you'd explained it away so thoroughly that the explanation felt more real than the thing itself. The details aren't important. A comment that landed wrong, a reaction that was larger than the situation warranted, a moment where something crossed a line you didn't know you had, until it was crossed. It was over quickly. They apologized or they didn't apologize, but explained it in a way that functioned as an apology. Context, stress, a bad week. Something that made the moment understandable in a way that made you the person who understood rather than the person who was hurt. You chose understanding. It felt generous. It felt like the kind of emotional maturity that relationships require. You'd been in relationships where small things became big things unnecessarily, and you were determined not to do that here with someone who mattered this much. You mentioned it to your best friend. You mentioned it in the framing that made it small. Something that happened, explained, resolved, worth noting but not worth worrying about. Your friend made a face that you didn't ask about because asking about the face would have required taking the face seriously. And taking the face seriously would have required taking the thing seriously, and you'd already decided the thing was small. The apology, when it came, was very good. Specific, warm, accompanied by something that felt like genuine remorse. You felt closer afterward in the specific way that resolution can feel like intimacy when you don't yet know the difference. You filed it somewhere. Not dismissed, I'd filed. The file is thin right now, it won't stay thin. Level 3, the pattern. The same thing happened again, and this time you recognized it while it was happening, which is different from the first time, and not as different as you'd hoped. You recognized the escalation, the specific sequence of trigger, reaction, the temperature in the room, changing in a way that you've learned to read the way you read weather. You recognized it, and you adjusted your behavior in real time, softening your tone, choosing different words, steering away from the territory that produces the reaction, and the adjustment worked in the sense that the escalation didn't fully develop, and you avoided the worst of it. You don't examine what it means that you're adjusting. The adjustment feels like skill, emotional intelligence, conflict management, the kind of relational competence that makes things work. You've reframed it so many times in so many directions that the reframing is now automatic, happening below the level of conscious thought, a habit you didn't choose and haven't named. The pattern has a shape now. You know the shape without having drawn it out. Certain topics are avoided. Certain times of day are navigated carefully. Certain moods are identified early and accommodated preemptively. You've built an internal map of the relationship's danger zones, and you route around them with the practiced efficiency of someone who has learned the hard way where the edges are. Your friends have noticed something, not the pattern, they don't have visibility into the pattern, but something about you, a cautiousness that wasn't there before, a way of referencing your partner that involves more explanation than it used to, more context, more preemptive defense of things nobody attacked. You're defending the relationship to people who haven't questioned it. You've started doing this automatically. You don't notice you're doing it. Level 4, the isolation. Your best friend said something at dinner and you didn't speak to her for 3 weeks. What she said wasn't cruel, it was careful. The kind of careful that people deploy when they've been holding something for a long time and have finally decided that the holding is worse than the saying. She said she was worried. She said she'd noticed things. She said your name in a way that meant she was talking to the you she knew before and wasn't sure that you was still accessible. You left dinner early. You told your partner about it that night. Not everything. A version. The version that centered your friend's overreach rather than her concern. And your partner's response was validation so complete and so immediate that it felt like relief and functioned like a door closing. The isolation didn't happen dramatically. It happened through a series of small prioritizations that each made sense individually. Your partner prefers when it's just the two of you. Plans with friends require negotiation that's exhausting. The friends who've expressed concern create tension in the relationship, and the tension isn't worth the lunch. The friends who haven't expressed concern are easier, but you see them less because the relationship fills the time that friendships used to occupy. Your world has contracted. You haven't mapped the contraction because mapping it would require standing outside it, and you're inside it. And inside it feels normal because normal is whatever you're used to. Your mother calls more than she used to. You keep the calls short. She asks questions with a careful quality that you deflect with practiced ease. You used to have a life that the relationship existed inside. Now the relationship is the life and everything else exists at the edges if it exists at all. Level 5. The cycle. You could draw the diagram now if someone asked. Tension builds. You feel it before anything is said, in the atmosphere, in the small signals that you've become expert at reading. Then the incident, the argument, the accusation, the thing said or done that crosses into territory you recognize and dread. Then the aftermath, the cold, the silence, the specific withdrawal that hurts in ways that the argument itself didn't. Then the rupture, the explosion or the breakdown, one of you reaching a limit. Then the apology, theirs or yours or both, accompanied by the specific intimacy of two people who've been through something together. Then the honeymoon, warmth, closeness, the relationship at its best, the version that reminds you why you're here. Then the tension starts building again. You know this cycle. You've been around it enough times to know it by feel, to identify which phase you're in at any given moment, to predict with reasonable accuracy what comes next. The knowing doesn't stop it. You've wondered about this, why knowing the pattern doesn't break the pattern, and arrived at partial answers that feel true and don't help. You've tried to leave twice. The first time you didn't make it out of the conversation. The second time you made it 3 days and then something happened. A call, a message, a moment of genuine connection that reminded you of the beginning. And you came back, and the coming back was accompanied by promises that were sincere and a relief so profound it felt like evidence that leaving was wrong. The relief of returning is real. You're not imagining it. What you're not seeing is that the relief is the cycle's mechanism. The pain creates the need and the return satisfies the need, and the satisfaction is what keeps you in proximity to the pain. The diagram is very clear when you draw it on paper. You can't see it from inside it. Level 6. The erosion. Someone asked what kind of music you like and you paused before answering. Not because you don't know, you did know once with the easy certainty of someone whose preferences are their own. You paused because you've spent so long filtering your preferences through someone else's reactions that the unfiltered version required excavation. You stood there for a moment doing archaeology on yourself, and the archaeology took longer than it should have. Your opinions have become provisional. You form a view and immediately run it through the internal filter. How will this land? Does this create conflict? Is this worth the cost of saying it? And the filtering happens so fast and so automatically that you often can't distinguish between what you actually think and what you've decided is safe to express. The interests you had before the relationship have mostly disappeared. Not dramatically removed, just gradually deprioritized one by one through the accumulation of small discouragements in the path of least resistance, and the simple arithmetic of a life whose time and energy are accounted for. The books you used to read, the friends you used to see, the version of Saturday morning that used to be yours. You look at photographs from before. The person in them looks like you and carries themselves differently in a way that's hard to name but impossible to miss once you see it. Lighter maybe, less careful, taking up more space in the frame. You've gotten smaller. The getting smaller happened so gradually that you didn't notice the direction of travel until you looked back at the distance. You exist in the shape that the relationship requires. You've forgotten what shape you were before. Level 7. The breaking point. It wasn't the biggest thing that happened. That's what surprises you afterward, that the moment of clarity arrived, not on the worst night, but on an ordinary one. You were in the kitchen. Something small happened. A comment, a look, a moment of the ordinary texture of this relationship, and something in you went very quiet and very clear simultaneously in a way that was different from anything that had come before it. You saw it, not a piece of it, not the version you'd been carrying that had enough justification woven through it to remain ambiguous. The whole thing at once, with a clarity that felt almost physical, the pattern you'd been living in, the person you'd become inside it, the distance between who you were in those photographs and who you were standing in this kitchen right now. The clarity didn't feel like anger. It felt like recognition, cold, steady, irrefutable. The kind of knowing that once arrived cannot be unknowed regardless of what comes next. You didn't say anything that night. You went through the motions of the evening with the strange doubled quality of someone who is present and has also already left. You lay in the dark and the clarity stayed, which clarity doesn't always do. Sometimes it arrives and dissolves by morning, and you wake up having explained it away in your sleep. This one stayed. You thought about your best friend whose dinner you left 3 years ago. You thought about the face she made that you didn't ask about. You understood the face now. You thought about the photographs. You thought about the music question and how long it took you to answer. In the morning, you made a decision. Level 8, the exit. Leaving is not an event. It's a process, and the process is the hardest thing you've done. You'd imagined it as a single moment, a conversation, a door, a clean before and after. The reality is messier and longer and involves going back twice before you go for good. And each time you go back, there's a reason that feels real because it is real, just not sufficient. And the difference between real and sufficient is something you have to learn through experience because nobody can teach it to you in advance. The pullback is physical, not metaphorical, a genuine gravitational quality to the relationship that doesn't respect your decisions and doesn't care about your clarity and operates below the level of reason, in the place where habit and attachment and the neurochemistry of long-term emotional patterns live. You make the decision with your mind and your body keeps sending different information. And the work of leaving is partly the work of waiting for your body to catch up with your mind. You call your best friend. The call is hard in the specific way that calls are hard when you need to admit something to someone who already knew it and waited. She doesn't say, "I told you so," because she's not that person. She says, "Come over." You go over. The process of reassembling yourself takes longer than you expect, and exactly as long as it needs to. The opinions come back first, small ones, low stakes, the gradual return of your own voice in your own head without the filter. Then the interests, then the friendships that were let go. Some of them are still there waiting. Some of them have moved on in ways that are their own kind of loss to grieve alongside everything else. You find the photographs. You look at them for a long time. You're not that person anymore. What you went through changed you in ways that are permanent, and some of them are losses, and some of them are things you couldn't have learned any other way. You put the photographs down. You put on the music you actually like. It sounds exactly like you remembered. Thank you for watching. Subscribe our channel and check out our other videos.